I'm completely disorganized today.
Hmm?
I'm completely disorganized today.
That's right.
There it is.
There you go. All right, how's everybody doing tonight? Good. Week 12. I want to go over some things on the overhead first. Announcement-wise, fall 2019 opened up Sunday. If you go to our MyRBC homepage, right on the banner ad, the front end, launches all the courses for CIS, PCT, and web. I'll go over them real quick. We have JavaScript face-to-face on Monday, 280 iOS programming online for the first time in the fall, and then 234 PHP online, 180 online, 110 Thursday 7:30 to 10 in this classroom, 130 this one. You guys know that one. CIS courses. That's a list of all the CIS courses. If you click on the link that says View CIS course and descriptions, it'll take you right to online services to where you can click on each description and register. Same with PCT, same with web. And then each one of those also has a view button underneath it to click on. I'll show you, and it'll launch Rock Valley College's webpage right to that data grid that you can then open up and read it and say, okay, I'm registering for it. And then you're in. Okay. Questions on fall 2019. There was a, let's see if I can find it. I think it's by the 9th. If you register by the 9th or something like you're going to a drawing for 3 credit hours or something like that. Do you guys see that? Let's see if I can find it here. Yeah, priority registration date. Don't forget today is your last day to register for a chance to win 3 free credit hours. So that's for fall priority registration.
Didn't they do that for the spring semester?
Do I know?
Didn't they do that for the spring semester?
I don't know if they did or not. I think they did. They did something like that.
They did something. I've never seen that.
Yeah, they did something like that. We had to have something
soon.
soon.
I could never get in because like the server was so busy.
Oh yeah, they probably had the same problem this time too. I know they did. Yeah. I won't mention anything about that. Anyway, going to the next slide. Summer 2019. Boom, wrong one. Again, all the summer courses are still open for registration. Avail yourself to read about those, along with the same deal. You can go right to the subsection. It'll take you right to it. You don't have to dig for it on Eagle or RVC, Rock Valley College website or online services. I'll put the work in so you wouldn't have to do that. And then there's the online service or the IoT course with the course title, CIS 290 IH001. It's a Saturday only, 4 Saturdays. Complete 4 projects on 4 Saturdays using particle photon, Arduino sensor, and code. Specifically, code you're going to be developing is Python. And I will show you a snippet of Python real quick here if you're not familiar with it. I'll be teaching at just project level. All right. Off camera. Okay. So over here is a Python script. You'll notice right around this area, it's declaring time random, and pulse. There's an LED pulse LED screen right there that's kind of funky with the iPad camera here, but it's a Pong simulator is what that is. It's a Pong simulation. Anyway, this is just so I can scroll down and show it to you a little bit more. So it goes into the ball that's bouncing around the screen. Anybody remember Pong? It's the very first console game. Anybody remember that one? A few of you maybe. That was my first game. It increases the difficulty level, and then it finally wins or loses. You'll see in a second. Blue won that time. It resets. There's a randomization on difficulty for each one. Goes back and resets. Anyway, so it's a lot like if you've taken like JavaScript, or maybe it's probably the closest language I guess I would probably relate it to. But it's a very fluid language. It's utilized not only in IoT programming, but also in manufacturing, artificial intelligence, which is not the future, but it's now. And anyway, I'll teach project by project basis for that to help understand what you need to know about Python for the course. It's not real difficult what you're going to be doing. No coding experience is needed. You don't have to have a language behind your belt if you don't have one. Project-based learning, but what that is basically is you will come in, have a handout, multi-page handout. You'll have your Arduino sensor, particle photon. You'll have the little plastic 4x6 case that has a breadboard in it and everything you need to get started. I will demo the product end result, run through the steps, and then for the next 3.5 hours, you'll create it yourself. And I'll walk around and help you. Then when you leave, you'll take home a completed IoT project. Questions about that? No textbooks required, or in registration is already started for that. All right, exit that one. Questione. First day of class, good question. I will pull that up. It's a little weird because it's a Saturday course and I have to start, I believe, technically before the summer one starts. So it'll end before the course ends, because the grades have to be turned at a certain time. So let's see here. Blah, 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 summer. We're looking at here it is. Okay. So let's see. It is technically supposed to start on 5/25 and go through 6/8. Okay. But in order to get the 4 weeks in, I'm going to have to start on the 1, 2, 3, 4. We can start on the 25th, which is technically the first official day. And it goes through the 8th, which you'll notice if I go 4 Saturdays, 1, 2, 3, 4, 15th is like a week after the 8th. So what I've thought about doing was, and I'll email all the students to see what works with everybody, but what I'd like to do is start on the 18th and then do the 18th, the 25th, the 1st, and the 8th. And then that would work better, I believe, grade-wise, to submit stuff. But again, it works, depends on everybody's schedule, really. Depends on the student's schedule that sign up for the class. It is in the morning. 7:30 to 8 is the check-in time. 8 o'clock will officially start. Yep, 8 o'clock Saturday morning, and we will be done by noon. The schedule says we'll be done by like 1 something. We'll be done by noon. 1:30, I'll be done by noon. So, yeah. And it does say it starts at 7:30. We're not starting until 8. Okay, good question. Any other questions on the IoT course? Great. All right. Well, tonight we're going to be covering Linux history. On Thursday, we'll look at all the Linux distros. I'll go over some cybersecurity Linux distros that are popular. And then on Thursday, we will be doing a Ubuntu with VMware. In fact, I'll probably just do the boot up. We won't use VMware. We'll probably just do the boot up from DVD, the live distro. It's a lot faster. And you'll take home Thursday the newest and greatest Ubuntu distro to play with and to have. All right. Okay, how many's used Linux at all? You've seen it, you've used it somewhat. Okay. The screenshot I took earlier of this computer here is Linux. It's a Linux distro running off of Raspberry Pi and the LED and a number of other circuitry breadboards on it. But anyway, Linux is tons of different flavors of Linux. You can create your own version of Linux. There's literally thousands of different versions. It's the geek's OS, really, is what Linux is. But it's also been used and has been used and is being used in companies and businesses and schools to tailor their software for what they want it to be used for. It's also very less prone to viruses. It doesn't get attacked like Microsoft does as far as with viruses. There's a few reasons why it doesn't, besides being open source, which is one main reason why hackers don't attack it. But there's other reasons why also how the OS is built, we'll talk about tonight, of why it's not hacked as often. Anyway, so we're going to go over some history of Linux and some distros and kind of discuss what that's all about. So it began in 91. It's not really been around a long time. Microsoft started around 80-ish, 83, 82, somewhere around there. DOS 1.1. If you've not seen the movie with Noah Wyle, Silicon Valley, Pirates of Silicon Valley, I would definitely recommend watching that, because it talks about the two operating systems that are mainly the ones that most folks use, which are Linux or Macintosh and Microsoft. It talks about the two companies and how they got started, and how they stole from one another and all that fun stuff. And so, but the history of Linux began in 91 as a personal project from a student, Linus Torvalds. He was a Finnish student to create a new operating system kernel. And since then, it's been marked by constant growth. And since its initial release in 91, it's grown from a small number of C files under the license prohibiting commercial distribution, meaning it's totally open source, cannot be sold. In its state in 2009, it was 370 megabytes of source under the GNU general public license. GNU, you heard that last week when we did the email encryption. It's, again, open source as well, the software we used last week. I use a lot of open source software. And Thunderbird was the software email client we used, and also under this GNU general public license. And so Linux is basically a popular distro, but and software that's built upon it, upon the distro can be sold, but the distro itself or the operating system cannot be sold, if that makes sense. Okay, so developers can make money off of developing apps, but there's tons of free apps out there as well. So the creation of Linux in 91, again, in Helsinki, Linus Torvalds began a project, later became a Linux kernel, and it was initially a terminal emulator, which Torvalds used to access a larger Unix server of the university. He wrote the program specifically for the hardware he was using and independent of an OS, because he wanted to use the functions of his new PC that he just got in the mail, an 8386 processor. Development was done in Minix using GNU-C compiler, which is still the main choice for compiling in Linux today, although the code can be built on other compilers like Intel Seed compiler. There he is. He's already retired. He retired at the ripe age of 42. Does not have to work again his whole life. He announced in '96 there would be a mascot. This was due to the fact that they were about to select a mascot. Torvalds did mention he was bitten by a little penguin on a visit to a national zoo and aquarium in Canberra, Australia. And Larry Ewing provided the original draft of today's well-known mascot based on this description. The name Tux was suggested by James Hughes, a derivative of Torvalds Unix. And there's the original logo for the wacky Linux operating system that he just originally created to make his life easier as a college student, which all college students do, by the way. Do something to make your life easier, right? The top operating systems built upon Linux: Ubuntu, that we'll play with on Thursday, Fedora, OpenSUSE, Debian, Madriva, Linux Mint, PC Linux OS, Slackware, Gentoo, and CentOS. The first, number 10, before I go over that, I want to talk about, I wrote up here on the board the word kernel to kind of talk about how Linux is different than Windows, much like it's built, Mac's built upon a Unix platform, so it's a lot like a Linux operating system as far as back end underneath it. The way Windows works today, presently, you have a .NET kernel, or .NET platform is what it's called in Windows, and all the users are created into that same .NET platform, and all the programs are dumped in there as well, right? So you have then the OS. So OS, users, programs, all in one .NET box, basically, okay? So when you log in Windows, you can see user 2, and user 3, and user 4, right? If you're user 1, if you're user 4, you can see the other users. When you install a program in .NET in Windows, other users can see those programs as well, right? And you see each other's folders, and you can share stuff if you want to. In Linux, this is how it works. Instead of .NET, by the way, .NET was actually created after Microsoft visited Linux World in 2012 and began developing the .NET framework, which is much more secure than what we used to get. If anybody remembers in Windows, you had to, when you installed software years ago, you had to install registry. All your apps to be installed in registry, and you could have conflicts of DLLs and conflicts of dynamic link libraries that other programs could use. And the .NET framework got rid of that, so it's a lot better than it used to be. But here's how the kernel works. So you got the kernel in Linux. In the OS, when you install a new user in Linux, it creates its own virtual kernel. And inside this virtual kernel is its own copy of the OS. And inside each one of these, also when you install programs, it's totally separate from all the other users as well. Okay, so dynamically, the creation of Linux kernel is such that if a user was to get hacked, or a user account was to get hacked, it would not affect all the other accounts, and it would not affect the base OS either. So it's not that it can't be hacked, it's just much more difficult to hack than Windows. Windows, if you attack user 1, the entire machine's attacked. In Linux, you attack user 1, you delete it, install user 1 again. Does that make sense? Much simplistic explanation, but that's basically the difference between Windows and the Mac world and Linux world. the Linux and Mac world are kind of in this world because it's built upon the Unix platform. And if you remember in the reading or earlier, Linux was built off Unix as a viewer for his projects in school to run hardware, basically. It was just an emulator at first. So number 10 OS is CentOS. And there's literally thousands of versions of Linux. I'm just touching the top 10, kind of like the Dave Letterman top 10. If anybody ever watched that, which I miss Dave Letterman, by the way. Anyway, if you ever get to watch Netflix, though, on Who Next Up, he does interviews. Letterman does. Pretty good stuff. I've been to New York 6 times, born in New York, and I went there 6 times to see him. Every time he was on vacation. Because he could take vacation 12 weeks out of the year, and he never told anybody when the vacations were. Every time. The last picture my kids took of me when they were right out of high school was I was just standing in front of Late Night Banner with a sub sandwich from Hello Deli right around the corner. Rupert Hello Deli used to be on the show, with a sad look on my face because it was literally the last time I visited his show before he retired. Anyway, CentOS. It's a group of community of OS contributors. It does not need a strong commercial support. Going back to the original conversation or topic I started this with, which is a Geeks OS. It's 100% compatible Red Hat Linux, which is Red Hat's actually the #1 OS for websites. About 78% of websites are built upon and run upon Red Hat Linux. If you go to GoDaddy, or GoDaddy is probably the most popular I could think of, and buy a domain and host it on Linux, it's going to be on Red Hat. Okay. And CentOS is for people that need an enterprise class OS without cost of certification and support. And they can modify it however they want to. Very minimalist, which you'll see a lot of these are desktop. The start menu is on the upper left corner on the default here. You can right click anywhere on the desktop and get to the terminal. And the reason for that is when Linux first came out, there was no easy way to install apps. So you kind of had command line everything in, and it's still kind of in there today. But when you start playing with it Thursday, take it home, I do recommend learning some terminal commands. But you technically don't have to do that anymore, just because it's more like a Windows interface now than it was years ago. And that's why it's so popular, probably. Because you get the same results as Windows, but with no viruses, basically. So it's not really, and I'll go ahead and mention it now. If you're a gamer, you won't like Linux because it's not really a gaming platform, but it is. It's good for graphics, multimedia, web browsing, office stuff, all that good stuff right there, all that bucket of stuff I just mentioned. It's great for that. Gaming, no. There's no games out there that you would even want to play, probably, on Linux.
Kind of working on it.
They're working on a little bit. The only game I like on Linux, and again, I'm not a first-person shooter gamer, but is Galaga. Galaga is my speed, and so, but doesn't take much processing power to do that one. But anyway, great for graphics, great for multimedia, great for general web browsing, taking storing photos, manipulating photos. A lot of open source apps to help in those areas, like GIMP is a lot like Photoshop. Scribd is a lot like Quark Express and Illustrator, which I was a graphic designer for years, and we used both of those. And then, importing images from your camera, no problem. Printing, no problem. Browser stuff, no problem. Same thing as you have in Windows, basically. But no viruses. Number 9, Gentoo. Gentoo is a cool package. It's all these are completely free, by the way, but every one of these say completely free. And folks that create Linux, including Linux, you'll notice in a lot of verbiage for Linux, it says completely free. And I don't know why it does that, but because free's free, but for whatever reason, it's completely free. Completely free. And so it's geared more to develop a lot of developing languages in this one, and network professional languages, network professional tools anyway, like subnetting, doing Python and networking. A little plug for this. Stephanie and Jim's teaching a Python class as well, networking and programming. I recommend it. If you're not going to take the iOS or the IoT, take that one. Are they doing summer 2 on that one or summer 1? Summer 1, yeah. So yeah, if you don't want to do the IoT, take that one. I recommend it. And by the way, Jim is writing up the Python description for an official course. So that's going to be good. I'm excited about that. We've been wanting to get Python on campus for a long time. So Gentoo basically is a package management system. TruePorts is the name of it. It's built on what's called a Python-based dependencies, where you can install apps fairly easily, and it has a lot of unmerging where you can do profiles, virtual packages, file management, and such. So there's a screenshot of Gentoo. Again, pretty minimalist. Number 8, Slackware. You like these names so far? Do you like these names? Pretty intelligent. No, they're very geeky names, right? All of them. Slackware. Patrick Volkerding is an advanced Linux operating system person. He designed it with twin goals of ease of use and stability of top priorities. So he wanted in this on the latest popular software while retaining sense of tradition, simplicity. It was originally developed by Linus in '91, and he added to it Slackware with the capacity to host like workstations all the way to web servers with this OS. He also had built-in web, FTP, and email servers right out of the box built into it, and is very popular desktop development tools as well. There's the screenshot. Number 7, PC Linux OS. I've installed this on my father-in-law's machine years ago, and he was having issues with his PC. Every time I'd go visit him, I'd have to clean it up and, run scans and all this fun stuff. Ended up putting PC Linux OS on his machine, showing him how to use it. 5 years later, didn't have to help him once in that 5 years. It just runs like most Linux machines do. You plug it in, you allow the updates to happen, and done. Which I was happy, so I didn't have to work on his computer every time I went over there. Very user friendly, and they call it PC Linux OS on purpose to bring in folks from the Windows world. And it comes one of the first bootable live CDs that we'll use on Thursday. It has a host of browser plugins, multimedia playback plugins. It has tons of Synaptic package management tools in it. And originally, and it's not no longer called Open Office, but it is owned by Sun Microsystems. I think it's called LibreOffice now. It's a totally open source Office suite, and it's really nice, and it works well, and it's free. So before the days of when you guys were offered, like now as a student, Office 360 no cost, I always pushed Open Office to students because it didn't cost anything, and now it's actually called LibreOffice, I believe, and it's created by the Sun Microsystems, and you can open up and edit Word, PowerPoint, Excel documents in that environment. And the beauty of a live CD you'll see on Thursday, if you've never used one, is it does not touch your computer's configurations, hard drive, or memory. So it runs entirely from the DVD when it installs, when it runs, and it boots up from your DVD. It takes a few minutes to boot up. It has about 1,500 software packages it installs. And, it's not as quick as a native install, but you can get your work done. And, you can boot it up from a USB thumb drive. You can port it to that. which I've done over the years, and plug it in any computer and boot up and work from a USB drive instead of a DVD, which most of your computers don't even have anymore. Do I know? VirtualBox, it will run a live distro will run slower than VirtualBox even. It will run a little slower because VirtualBox is actually installing the OS in a virtual hard drive, whereas the live distro is installing the entire OS and everything on your memory of your computer, right? So it's not installing anything, but it is in your memory while it's running. So if you have boatloads of memory, the more memory you have, basically, the faster it's going to be, and the faster processor you have. And but once it's up and running, you know, if you're doing general web browsing or you're working on a document or a slideshow or whatever, you're not going to have any issue with it. But if you're doing anything that's rendering screens like videos or movies, nah, you don't want to do that. It's not gonna work, right? A live distro really was designed just to test this distro to see if you like it. Because if you do like it on the screen here, if you do like the distro, you can then double click on the desktop icon that says install. And when you click on the install, it'll actually walk you through the steps of partitioning your drive if you already have Windows on it, glomming onto a portion of that partition on your hard drive, separating it, formatting it, and installing that. I wouldn't recommend it that way though. What I'd recommend is if you like it, install VirtualBox or VMware, download the ISO from linux.org and install it on the virtual environment. It's going to be much faster. You can install that virtual environment though on a USB drive for sure. That external file, that external drive that you're installing and working from, that works fine. I always recommend those students when you're doing virtual anything, make sure and do a backup. So as soon as you get your virtual environment set up in VirtualBox or VMware, whatever you use, do an immediate backup of that OS once you have it all set up and all the programs running like you like. Because once you do a backup, then if something pooches out on that in the installation that you just did, you can recover from that backup, if that makes sense. You don't have to go through the hours of installing again, which we've all had to do maybe. And so just quickly do a backup and, you know, store it away that way. And drive space, actually, external drive space is pretty reasonably right now that you can purchase. You know, 2-3 terabyte drive is pretty reasonable compared to 5 years ago. You know, under $100, you can get a lot of space that you can use on a small form factor too, a very small form factor. And so recommend backing up if you do a virtual OS. Number 6, Linux Mint. This is actually for multimedia. It was the first multimedia distro. Out of the box, had all the plugins at the time for all the codecs, DVD playback, Java, everything for multimedia playback from music and movies. So you just basically put the CD in, you could run it and start, you know, playing with it and start watching movies and downloading music and stuff like that. It actually became like multimedia environment before Apple TV, before Amazon Fire, before Roku. You had this that you could use at home and install all of your media and run it throughout your house and just, you know, set up on the network and run it. Here's a screen of this. It did have it was first distro also to include Firefox. Before that, it would just have its default browser, Linux browser, kind of like all your OSs have their default browser, like, you know, Windows was Internet Explorer, Mac, Safari. Linux also had a default one as well. Chromium was one. Before that was another one, KBox. But web, you know, started bringing in some name brand browsers around this time. You'll also notice Thunderbird's on there like we used in the lab last week. Music players on there. And those are the packages mainly for multimedia. Number 5, Mandriva. This was a good one. I had this for a number of years. I really like Mandriva. It's really nice OS. Began in '98, and it was one of the very first really nice packaging systems for programs. It was like a store basically, like we have now, right? It was an app store basically for Linux. Before this, you'd have to do what's called conditional installs, meaning if you had an app like Galaga and I want to install it, I'd install 5 other dependency apps before I installed Galaga. And I have to do it all through console prompts, which I didn't mind doing. It's one of the challenges was just figuring out how to do it and it working, right? But when this came about, you didn't have to know how to do that. You could just double click on an app and it would install it like it does today. And it's really way before its time. If you think about it, 2005 is when this packaging system came out. Way before the Apple App Store, way before Microsoft Store, and so they had it was a cloud version basically of apps that you could download and install on Linux. Way, way, way before Microsoft and Apple even thought about doing it. And you might think about this for a second. Where do you think Apple and Microsoft got the idea for the cloud app store? Right here. It already existed for a long time, right? And these guys perfected it over iterations of time. They perfected the app store, Synaptics, and worked all the bugs out. And where do you think most of the developers from Apple came from and Microsoft came from? Linux. The developers of these awesome Synaptic packaging tools for software came from folks like Mandrake. They were based in Brazil, and they also had a headquarters in Paris, France. And really good OS, very easy to use, and updated constantly when it first came out. Very minimalist desktop, like all of them. Number 4. Debian. Debian basically is going to be used and was used basically for software application developers. It came with, by default, inside the OS, 20,000 programs that were precompiled in the OS, all free. And it also had its own Synaptic application software, downloadable, searchable repository, way before, again, all the cloud-based ones like we have today existed. And they were all online and they had some pretty good games on this one, nothing like you guys are used to in the Windows world. For gaming, for game developers, you've got today mobile, console, Windows still a little bit, definitely, and that's it. And mobile, both iOS and Android. Consoles are kind of losing steam, I think, maybe I'm wrong. The console boxes, like the Microsoft One box, and they're still around. I know people still use them. You can still buy them. But when you start seeing products like this on like store shelves at checkout lines, that's when they're kind of going down. They're not really selling like they used to, So you got your Snickers, you got your Milky Way, you have your Xbox, that you kind of see it like that now in stores today. But because everybody's playing online or playing on their mobile devices, and that's where all the developers that develop these apps work from first, is from a mobile standpoint. But nothing replaces first-person shooter on a PC tower with a great monitor and sound system and processor. You're not going to replace. No, mobile's not going to replace that portion. Not anytime soon, anyway. Not anytime soon. It's getting better, but so Debian basically, again, another iteration past Mandriva. And it built upon what Mandriva was doing with a lot of cool apps that you could download for free. And it added more program paths, you'll notice here. And what does this look like? You'll notice the menu. what's it starting to look like here to you? A little bit. A little like Windows, right? You got accessories, right? Now, some of them are different, like, Windows doesn't have education and games and well, has games, but graphics, internet, office, programming. And so, Linux also, this was on the first version. It included universal access for, making the screens bigger and fonts bigger and stuff like that. Number 3, OpenSUSE. OpenSUSE is now run by Novell, which used to be a huge network operating system provider when I first started networking years ago in education. Most high schools and colleges back then, and when I say back then, in the 90s, were running Novell operating system server for their distribution of the networks. Microsoft was around, but it was in business only, really. Education had Novell because it fit better in the educational system. It actually had some cool tools that Microsoft didn't have, like it had a built-in messenger system within Novell, a built-in way to easily control computers within Novell, and it had a really cool admin interface to control and install networks on your system. But once Novell folded, OpenSUSE, they came and started supporting and installing OpenSUSE. Okay, so you can pay Novell now as a school or as a business to come in and do a custom install of OpenSUSE from server to client. Mainly it's used today for server OS, for the file server and authentication and email. And then a lot of the clients in the company will still run Windows, but all the back-end servers ran off of SUSE, OpenSUSE. And so, again, completely free, like all the other ones. It basically is a server OS, in my mind, more so than a consumer OS. Even though it can run as a consumer OS, it's just better built for a web server, a file server, authentication server, DHCP server, right out of the box, really easy to set up and to leverage in your company. And so right out of the box is going to have everything needed for that. But again, you can run it as just a desktop. They do have a desktop version. They also have a server version. They even now have a cloud version as well. You can download and play with in the cloud. And most of these do. But you'll notice it's got, like, in the menu here, Firefox, word processor, audio player, photo management program, file manager, configuration of desktop. The other thing that featured in Linux that Windows doesn't have still today, really, like this level anyway, and Mac has this as well, is these little 4 boxes. Basically what it is, it's 4 desktops. So you can click on one of these 4 boxes and be running, say, in this box programming, this box your music, in this box, I don't know, graphic stuff, and in this box, whatever, pictures maybe. And as you click on each one of these boxes, it's literally like 4 separate desktops in one computer. That's kind of cool. It's easier to manage anyway than the Alt tab that we all do in Windows. And so once you use it, by the way, and you get used to using it and go to Windows to do anything, you're like, whoa, this is a nightmare. And so much nicer workforce. And again, Windows has gotten better, but still not to that level of different desktops you can add. Number 2, Fedora. Fedora, it was a project by Red Hat. Again, so because it's Red Hat, you can probably guess it's a lot of web development stuff, a lot of web servers in Fedora, which it is. It's basically opened, created by a Red Hat engineering team, does builds on Fedora, mid paragraph here. And they will do basically 2 to 3 times a year, they'll do updates to Fedora on a scheduled update path. And the people that use it know when those update paths are, and it's no surprises or anything. And it's mainly used for web servers. And the way web servers are built in the Linux world, once you install your web server and it's up and running, You unplug the keyboard, mouse, monitor, put it in the corner, and that's it. It runs. You don't set for automatic updates or not. Normally, no. You update it when you want to. And again, it just runs. And unlike Windows, if you ever run a Windows server for web, you have to restart that thing at least once a month usually, if not more, depending on how many times it's used from people, how much it's accessed outside your business. Linux can literally go for years. I've had Linux boxes run for years and not have to restart them, except for power outages or something or whatever, but never had to restart them because of resource purposes. No. And again, a lot of reasons for that, by the way, is this diagram up here, that when installed like a web server, it's a separate entity from the OS. And so it just runs cleaner and more efficiently. Very minimalist desktop on this one. Number one, Ubuntu. That's the one we're going to be reading Thursday. This is the #1 distro today in Linux. And the reason for it, you'll find out Thursday if you've never used it, is it's much closer to Windows as far as usability and all that coming over from the Windows world. And it's built on what's called, you'll hear this word a lot in Ubuntu, the manifesto. It's got a manifesto that it is enshrined in, and it's developed in, I believe, every single language in the world now, or close to it. It's one of their goals. Also, any type of disability, from little kids that have, or adults that have, any type of autism. They have tons of different softwares built specifically on this platform, Ubuntu, for folks that have that type of disability. And one of the cool apps I remember hearing about with disability was there's one of them, I believe it's remember the kids have a hard time remembering things throughout the day. Okay, like they get home at the end of the day, mom and dad ask them, "How's your day?" Don't know. I mean, normal kids do that too, right? But still, this one's like they literally cannot remember anything. So anyway, there's one of the softwares they built that, as throughout the day, it's a tablet. It's on a tablet. It basically records the events of their movement and where they've been, and sound and videos automatically. And when they come home, the parent can then, and the child both can play it back to recap kind of their day, if that makes sense. It's kind of cool. And it was built, one of the apps built upon Ubuntu that has done that. So then a lot of other use cases for that as well, and research as well for medical community on Ubuntu. It's got a pretty good multimedia library built into it. You'll see Thursday. This one you can just type in a movie or a song or an artist, and it has its own kind of app store kind of thing, where you can, a lot of open source stuff too, like artists that aren't yet on Apple and are not on any other platform. They'll publish here, like, independent artists. It's kind of cool. And so I found some pretty good music over the years, and independent movies, like Mining the Gap would be a good example of a movie that probably would have been put on here for folks to watch, to get the word out. And so Linux, open source, and I'm going to show here in a second, and completely free, by the way. Mention that for the 100th time. And a few cases where you should stick to Windows, and I've already mentioned a couple of them. Proprietary software for companies, definitely. You're a hardcore gamer. You work in graphics or color, like heavy graphics, like magazine, article type stuff. Book industry will definitely not work in Linux. They'll work more in the Mac world. Mac first, and Windows second, probably. And your hardware is not yet supported. That's the 4 reasons why. I'm not going to watch the video. but I am going to go to the website, linux.org. I definitely recommend you watching the video, but I'm not going to play it in here. This link is in our folder for this week as well, the Prezi. Okay, so this is linux.org, and I'm just showing this to the different types of Linux distros. I'm going to go to the download Linux area, and you'll see some of the names we went over tonight: Ubuntu, Mint, CentOS, Xbuntu. We did go over. That's a fairly popular one as well. Kubuntu is a good one. Anything that has Ubuntu on the end of it is a version of Ubuntu, right? Kubuntu, Xbuntu, PC Linux, Puppy, Solus, Black Lab. Anyway, I'm not going to go over all these, but linux.org, just remember that. In linux.org, you can not only download the distro, you can actually get into beginner Linux, intermediate, and advanced level tutorials on how to use Linux, and specifically if you're on networking or programming side, some of the tutorials are really good. Everything to all of the commands I talked about earlier, you can learn all the basic commands like the gmod, distribution, getting around Linux directories, the command prompt, text editors. I want to talk about, before we're done here, the different flavors of cybersecurity Linux I wrote on the board. Kali Linux is a popular one, Parrot, Backbox, Black Arc, Kane, you've heard that with Kane Enable, and then BugTrack. All of those are popular network security distros. And I will pull up a couple top ones, like Kali is probably one of the most popular. Penetration testing, ethical hacking tools. You can download this, by the way, as a live distro. And then when you download it, you can run it like we'll do Thursday with Ubuntu. They do have with Kali a light version, which is roughly about the size of the old CDs, but it'll take about a quarter size of a DVD burn, or you can install it on a USB drive as well. They do have 64-bit version as well, and 32-bit version. The ARM images, or if you are installing this on a mobile platform and you want to kick it over to a mobile distro and actually customize it for your own, it walks you through how to do that. It even goes over certifications that it has for Kali for penetration testing, security wireless, cracking parameter, Metasploit, and then there's tons of free Kali Linux training that's out there. That with the distro in hand, you can go to kali.org or kali.training, and it has tons of different distro tutorials on how to use all the different tools that are in Kali. The other one I will pull up, Backbox is a good one. And all these have pretty good. Kali is probably the best educational, but all these are really good. Backbox is another free OS for the network security world. Excuse me. It's got on it its own version of Linux. It has on it a drag and drop interface for dashboards to build your own. Let me go to the Linux portion here. This one, if you click on the download button on Linux link, it'll take you right to where to download. And most of you have a 64-bit, so you can download that onto your environment and as an ISO, and then install it maybe in a virtual. They even have a cloud version of Backbox that you could actually sign up for and test it out. One last one I will look at will be Kane, C-A-I-N-E. This one's a live distro. It's a good one too to try out. Here's what it looks like. And it has built into it an arsenal of data, manipulating tools from penetration testing for Wi-Fi, network builds. It also has tons of resources in here for learning. And I do want to mention some of the list of tools that are added in here is right here. NurseSoft is a software to crack Wi-Fi, ethical hacking Wi-Fi. You can also, though, from this on the Windows side on Kane, when you download it, it does have a downloadable Windows side that looks like this here. And these are all portable apps you can install on a Windows USB drive. And it's got tons of forensic tools in it. That one of the ones I'll mention, the photo record, USB protector, file analysis. These are ones that can actually look for traces of the files being encrypted and decrypted on a system. And so Kane is, again, a popular forensic downloadable distro that I definitely recommend. So Kali, Backbox, Kane are top three. I recommend then Parrot, BlackArch, BugTrack, and then all these are downloadable for you to play with. On Thursday, what we're going to do, I'll go back to the lab, is we're going to boot up from your DVD that I'll give you on Thursday of Ubuntu. You'll boot up from it. The steps are in here for VMware, but I think we're just going to boot up from it. It'll be much faster. And then you can do the same at home. And then we'll go over 10 facts about Ubuntu as well. And then we'll end with talking about what your experiences was like with Ubuntu and what you think about it, especially those who it's your first time being exposed to Linux. Okay? All right. Well, that's it for tonight. We'll see everybody Thursday. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, see you Thursday.